There's two other people here.
You're frozen.
You?
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Who's our presentation by tonight?
I'm sorry?
Who is giving the presentation tonight?
We both will. I'm going to
Okay.
be managing the slides, and if you could help me by allowing me to have the right to go ahead and also record the session from this side, would that be okay with you?
I can try. I do not know if I know how to have dual recordings going.
Right. We've done that before in one other presentation. Okay. If you could go to my name and right-click on it, then it allows you to grant me that extra permission.
Okay, I will do that.
Thank you. I'm Nils.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, no problem.
Okay, there we go. And by the way, my name is not Danita Hudson.
Okay.
I'm Eve Edelberg, and I am your room monitor, and I'm here to help if there's any problems with Zoom, or if you need me to monitor the chat, or could anything else arise that you might need assistance with.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
For some reason, I still don't see the recording button. Oh, I see it now. It showed up. Okay, we're good. I'm sorry.
That's quite all right.
Yeah, so yeah, both of us are recording, so we're good.
Okay. You want to start?
Yes, please, whenever we're ready.
All right, whenever. Can you put the slides up whenever you're ready?
Oh, yes, you know, I knew I forgot something. Let me go to the slides.
Thank you.
And make sure I've got the right one. Yeah. I do not want to present the draft ones. Can you see them?
Yes.
Okay, let me set up the show and okay, good. Can you see the full page?
I can see the full page. Thank you.
Good. Yeah, you're welcome.
Well, so thank you for joining us, everyone here. This last session, this evening, wherever you are. My name is Maria Moore, and I am coming from Washington State. So today's presentation is the doctoral program Persistence for Latino students. And my name again is Maria Moore. And just give you a little introduction about who I am. I live in the not so sunny state of Washington. I'm a licensed mental health counselor and marriage and family therapist. And I work with Veterans Administration. So my work consists of working with combat veterans and veterans who have been traumatized. So we do work with individuals, couples, and families.
Thank you, Maria. And allow me to introduce myself. I am Nils Juarez Palma. I go by Nils Palma, and I am a doctoral student at Liberty University. I live in the great city of Atlanta, Georgia. And I am currently a student trainee waiting for licensing. Have to complete the degree to apply for it, but I'm very pleased to be here. Maria?
Thank you. So our presentation today is this study explore how Latino cultural values influence student retention in a counselor education and supervision doctoral program.
Thank you. And along the way, if anyone has any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. We don't want to have to bore you to death. No, I'm just kidding. But we would like to hear feedback from you. Yes. One of the interesting things that we found is that 40 to 50% of the students, doctoral students in the United States abandon their studies every year. Minority persistence in the studies has always been a concern until you look at Latino students. According to one of the studies by Vaquera in 2007, Latino students have the highest rate at 69%, followed by white doctoral students at 51%, approximately 51.41. And in the psychological sciences across the board, the estimate is that 50% of the students will drop or leave the doctoral program along the way. As a result of that, many studies have been done, and universities and doctoral programs are very concerned about what is happening for students to be dropping at such high rates, when in a recent study that I read, the dropout rate for undergraduate students is closer to 10-15%. Back in the 1970s, a series of studies were made, and they were driven by Tinto's philosophy, by Tinto's observation, to find out what it is that causes student dropout. And as we will see later, his studies have been very influential, and unfortunately, though, his studies were very culturally encapsulated. And because of that, there is a significant amount of misinformation in the field about what causes Latino student attrition. We took the liberty of doing a sample of convenience during a project that we did at school, and we asked a couple of our students from different countries, but nevertheless Latino in background, a series of questions which we then translated into the study that you are seeing today. Usually, most people will say that finances and academics are the reason why everybody, or at least the students, leave. If you look at Tinto's studies, his argument is much simpler, and that is that minority students are not being properly integrated into what he called white society. And mind you that I'm using his word and his terminology in order to maintain consistency with the literature. So it's important for us to keep that in mind. Tinto studies have influenced retention programs for many, many decades, almost 40 years now. Part of what he did was that he said that academic integration was important and that social integration. Unfortunately, a lot of these terms, as Vaquera later on pointed out, are not well defined, neither are they operationalized. He did emphasize throughout his writings that it was important for minority students to adopt white cultural values, which I consider to be quite interesting, given that his samples were limited to undergraduates and were excluding a number of other minority groups, such as Latinos in the United States. Braxton, Sullivan, and Johnson in 1997 pointed out that it was an untested model, and yet universities were using it to draw their policies on retention for students. Gufrida did a similar study, and in 2006, Gufrida also endorsed Braxton's view that a lot of these studies were quite socially, were really quite unproven. Do we have any questions so far, please? Okay. The impact of Tintos, as I was saying, is that there has not been any significant improvement, according to Ehrenberg, in a study done in 2007, by applying his model to retention, especially in the graduate studies. He simplified racial and ethnic differences, and it became difficult then because the perspective of retention became one of the administration, setting the tone and setting the steps for that progress going forward. In a study done in 2007 with Latinos, which is one of the few that has been done, Vaquera applied the framework to doctoral student attrition. Among the criticisms that she had was that there was no operationalization of social integration. Really, what does that mean? How do we measure it? What is the outcome? And that the model did not account for how races and ethnicities define social integration. So Tinto's model, as much as it has been used and as much as it has influenced many programs for persistence, has some differences with what Vaquera found out. she discovered that socioeconomic background influences the Latina persistence. An ironic point is that she found out that people who were at the polar opposites of the socioeconomic spectrum had a higher retention rate than those, or persistence, than those who were in the middle or classes. And also, contrary to some of the other reports, the Latinos did not see social integration as a factor in retention. Third point here, which was introduced in 2016 by Ayala and Chalupa, was that Latino national identity was a determinant critical factor. And we'll discuss that as we go over the results of our report today. Some of the issues that we're looking at is going to the unheard voices, because most of the studies have been done without Latino participation, or very, very minimal, like a 0.2, 2-3% of the total number of people being studied. The experience also has been interpreted through cultural lenses, both of the Latino as well as those doing the studies. And the Latino nationality, which is a critical point in many other areas, such as in medical studies, may or may not affect what happens to Latino students in persistence. Many people place emphasis on similarities and ignore the differences between the different groups. I don't know, Maria, if you have any comments or experience that you may have had with that, since you and I have been in a lot of classes. Anything you want to add on that last line or before? Voice.
Yes, so I really agree with that. I mean, it's important to acknowledge what our differences are, because there are differences. When you come from a different culture, when you have an accent, when you don't know the cultural norms of other people, it's important that we acknowledge that and embrace that, and not try to pretend that it's not there, because it is there.
Thank you. Yes, that's been one big important thing that we also wanted to look at in the study. Basically, because of the issues that I have already identified with with Tinto's model, in 2005, Gold looked at and attempted to update the model of Tinto's, and he added a third part of the issue, which was professional identity. He said that as students were able to develop a professional identity, social integration and academic integration became less of a problem, and issues in those two areas could be ironed out by the students developing or emerging professional identity. Several studies confirms that Gold's model applied to doctoral students. Stallone also went on to explain that negative experiences could result in attrition or in personal concerns of wealth. Again, interesting is that none of those studies included Latina doctoral students in their population sample. The 6 points that Gold had identified, or the 6 themes that we find, are that students were leaving because they were not good at research, that their personal expectations did not match academic reality, that they had poor relationship with a faculty advisor. There was a clash between personal goals and that of the university, or they saw poor employment opportunities should they remain behind to pursue doctoral studies, and that the student did not adapt to the academic values that were required to succeed in that university.
Nils,
yes.
Is it okay? We could maybe see if anybody's willing to kind of tell us what they think so far of this information, because it's really very interesting to say, wow.
Precisely, yes, yeah, because we are at that key point.
Yes. So if anybody's willing to share what they think about this information, or even their own experience in their program.
I feel that I believe you said it was Golds, is how it's pronounced,
Yes, ma'am.
model where he um, added in the professional identity is very critical to both the other two legs of that triangle. Without
Mm-hmm.
having that professional identity within that triangle, you are left with just the social integration, and the academic performance of the student, and uh, that's not going to give the broader picture.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's true.
Thank you.
Thank you. Maria, anyone else?
I don't see anybody else saying.
Okay.
So, thank you.
If you have any questions, please, again, I'm looking at everybody's mute button, so if you want to speak, please unmute, and we'll ask you right then and there as we can to speak, because these are things that, as we look at it as a community, we have to think. Yes, Jose, John, I'm sorry, Stefan.
Well, I think one of the things that I'm going through my master's program that I continue is the invincibility of just the Latino's perspective, whether it's theoretical. And I know that there's part of me that's very dismayed to a certain degree, because it's kind of it's kind of like just a perspective that oftentimes, like within the culture in the United States, we're so present, but at the same time we're consistently invisible. Even in institutions of higher learning, it seems like there is this consistency of invincibility, whether it's, like I said, in the educational system or even outside of the educational system. And I think for me as a master's student who would like to continue my education, I know that there's something about that really upsets me deeply.
And you're right. We have seen that. Not only, I believe, speaking for myself, that is something that I have experienced. And talking to other counselors who are in the profession, actively pursuing work at a master's level that are Latinos, that has been critical for them. One of them once conveyed to me that he felt that he was only good at the place that he was working at to work with Latinos, and that if the Latinos were not there, they went to somebody else, the other clients, but they were not giving him non-Latinos. And the fact that it was like he was not there. And I have experienced that. And one of the things that I am curious about, I have developed, because of my personality, because of my identity, a very strong, would you say, Maria, personality that almost sometimes becomes grating. But it's thank you. I like the affirmation. But at the same time, it's something that I've had to do in order to move forward. And you are right, John. It is an invisibility that perpetuates a number of issues and a lot of assumptions that don't quite do justice to what we as individuals can bring to the profession. Thank you. Okay. Maria, are you ready?
So, thank you, Nils. So, some of our research questions. What is your experience of persisting in your doctoral program? And what expectations did you have of yourself on entering the program? Do you believe that there have been growth opportunities for you to be involved in professional development? Is there a correlation between the program support and the opportunities? And how does God play a role in your persistence to stay in this program? So, sorry, I'm trying to find my slides. So we have results. Two things came up when Nils did his research. And the first one was the support. So support is very important. So support meaning faith, support self-determination, family support, the emotional family support, and family modeling. And the second one was self-advocacy.
Maria, would you like to speak a little bit about some of the observations that the participants had given?
Yes, so let me find my teacher. Sure will. So on faith, one of the participants wanted a doctoral program that blended faith and academic rigor. She said, I think those were the two major components. It needed to be faith-based and it needed to be a blended program that gave me the flexibility. The other participant said, without God, I could not have done this, gone as far as I have. I come from a charismatic church and strangers have prophesied that I would go into education. And this opportunity in the PhD CS came open to fulfill that prophecy that I would be teaching. In both cases, the university.
I was going to say, because the university where we attended, this was done as a faith-based university. So it's interesting how the religious, spiritual themes were present in the students' answers. I'm sorry.
So that is an important component, and it is one of the support ones, right? Faith.
Right.
And so the second element was self-determination. Self-determination derives from the student decision to finish the degree at all costs, right? One of the individuals said, expectations-wise, for sure I have that I completed. It was something that I would embark from beginning to end. I think it's just something I've just always had in my mind. I have a bachelor's, great. I have a master's, and now it was always something in my mind that I would go to the end. It's just something I expected of myself. And the other participant said, yes, I expected to work hard to learn about counseling and to earn a degree, and I expected to finish. I'm not the first one in my family to have a PhD of any type.
Yeah, family support was interesting because family support was one of the critical factors that Maria is going to highlight that in some of the other studies with other members of other ethnicities did not come through, I believe. I think this is more unique to the Latino population. Would you like to speak more to it, Maria, please?
Yes, so let me tell you, so the source of external support for both students came from family members rather than from the approval of friends and peers. So one of the students said, well, not my children or my spouse. Really, no one had any expectations about me. My mother was upset because I never became a medical doctor. And as she likes to tell me, this is not a real doctorate. The only expectation they had of me was that they know that when I commit to something, I tend to finish it. And so the family has been supportive of my endeavors, even when they do not agree with what I want to do. So once I started that doctoral program, they began to encourage me to finish it. They are proud that I have come this far. The other student said, I think so. Well, I think hand in hand with the expectations of myself. I think the influence behind some of the need to pursue a doctorate came from my dad, my husband. He's so proud of it. He is probably the reason I'm still here.
Family modeling.
And the family modeling. Both respondents came from families where advanced degrees were not unheard of. They had already been influenced by their family of origin to pursue an advanced degree. One participant said, my father is a great scholar, very smart, very dedicated, and so he has 2 masters, criminology and divinity, and he is just one more class away from a doctorate in divinity. So just looking up towards that example, it is just something that, I don't know, it is friendly competition or just him instilling what is great pursuit of an education. And the other student said, I'm not the first in my family to have a PhD of any type. So when we talk about So I wanted to ask if there's any questions or any comment about the students, and if not, we will move right along.
Yeah, one quick thing.
Go ahead.
As we talk about it, notice that the issues that are brought up here are very different than those in the earlier reports that we had found. The level of, which is what Vaquero was pointing to, social integration for Latino doctoral students, at least in counseling, counselor education and supervision, is very little externally, in the sense that they don't need community or don't seek community or peer approval, but that they have a whole different set of factors that create and provide the support they need to go through the program. I was going to say survive, but I'll go next.
Not that bad, right?
No.
And I could say that for me, it has been truly the faith and self-determination, because without it, I would have quit. As you know, you find yourself being isolated and really having a difficult time of not knowing who to turn to or who to ask. So it had to just be the self-determination to say, I started something and I'm going to finish. Like one of the students said, you know, when I start something, it's my own expectation of myself to finish something, whether I have support or not. And then there's that self-advocacy part as well, that if nobody's going to help me with it, I have to figure it out. And it becomes stressful sometimes.
And you know, what's interesting about these answers is the person who asked the questions, the interviewer, was not a Latino. Mm-hmm. And that interviewer also went on to do the first and the level of interpretation. Mm-hmm. And she also participated in the final levels. So it's interesting that many of these themes, we tried to protect it against our bias. And still they were coming out. When I started, I did not know what we were going to find. So it really pleased me to see that we were going into some sort of uncharted territory with what we had been told. I'm sorry, Maria.
That's okay. No, you're fine. Thank you. Thank you for your comments. So again, if anybody has any comments or just wants to say anything about their own history, please unmute yourself so we can hear from you. So the integration of themes here is faith, family support in the model, and self-determination. So these are what we already spoke of, and then plus advocacy. And so that's what we're going to tap into right now. What is advocacy? And so advocacy in the form of self-advocacy derives from the loneliness and isolation that Latino students feel they experience as they move through the program. During the interview, both students shared that they felt left out of the loop, and that gave them a disadvantage when it came to having access to special programs, planning for the future, and understanding requirements. So self-advocacy became a replacement for social relationships with others in the program or the faculty.
Yeah, I think this is when we were talking about invisibility a moment ago. Mm-hmm. It's a perfect, I think, description of one aspect of that invisibility.
Yes. So, and again, that you have to kind of have self-advocacy in order to be able to complete the program, because without it, you will end up dropping out. You know, so even so, the students agree that faith allowed them to mediate the isolation they felt. However, it was difficult for them to describe their feelings of being different. The participants answered focused on internal locus of control and rejected the idea that they were dependent on others for inspiration or motivation to persevere.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
When you're talking about self-advocacy, could you define for me how self-advocacy differs from advocacy for the client?
Well, advocacy for the client, is that correct what you said? Because I had some noise in the background.
Yes, I have a noisy air conditioner. I apologize.
I understand. Advocacy for the client is when you teach the client to be able to access the resources they need in order to remedy situations which they're facing. Sometimes it's social, sometimes it's legal, it can be a variety of issues, educational. And you coach and you guide and you teach them how to be able to resolve those problems. I think in this case, self-advocacy for the student is that if they are not moving around, if they are not doing things that they need, that other students as a rule don't have to do, the opportunities that are available are not going to be made or given to them. So this is part of the issue of advocacy. They have to go out and they have to ask questions. They have to be all the time in a state of what don't I know right now so that I can remedy that. And that's in many ways what the students had identified, that they were not, and it's more than being on the inner or outer loop of information. It's just that information about programs and opportunities were not flowing their way. One of the good things of this study was that when it was given it over to the administration of the university, they took a lot of remedies to make sure that now all of that information is being passed out equally. But up to that point, it was an area where the Latino students were just somehow or another. I'm going to share a little bit of a personal story. And we were sitting in a class, and there were 3 white students, females, who looked at us. And it was interesting, the number of macroaggression which they were making in the sense of, oh, we're trying to be supportive. That could have been discouraging, but through self-advocacy, you continue. I was sitting in a class on supervision where we were doing, as students, this was just introduction to supervision. We were doing the presentation and with one of the students who had volunteered to be the test supervisee. And at one point, the conversation between the 2 white students got very, very good. It was very informative and illustrative, and it was good. And along the way, they touched on a topic which I had been studying, which was the role of attachment styles and borderline personality disorder. So at my time, when I had a moment, I interjected that, hey, in addition, let's keep in mind how the role of attachment disorder goes with all of this. The role of attachment styles can go with borderline personality, to which the other white student, my peer, turns to me and said, "Shut up, you don't know anything. You're ignorant." She said, "I'm an expert. I know everything, and I've never heard of that." And right then and there, in front of that student, I was like, okay. So it was interesting that if we don't stand up, if we don't advocate, if we don't do a little bit more of grading than other students, we're not going to be heard and we're not going to be seen.
So in other words, the self-advocacy is a way of building your own resilience.
Precisely.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Maria?
I think it's also really interesting that when you, with these type of dialogues, because to a certain degree, it's another narrative to a narrative that, we have to hear a different voice from a different, cultural perspective. And so I think that is something that just unconsciously this country fights, the different narratives and the cultural values that allow a multicultural society to thrive. There seems to be a persistent fight to limit the narratives. Therefore, the issues that are being discussed can be simplified to a very, you're right,
Mm-hmm.
I you're wrong, I'm right, and so on. A very black and white, communism, democracy, socialism, democracy, a very simplified version of an American identity that is in our history as Americans.
No, you're correct. I have had a very interesting life growing up. I'm probably the oldest person right now on this board. And I say that with pride because in my culture, old age is seen as a blessing. And one thing that I came across was a number of blue-eyed, almost blonde individuals. And they said to me, we descend from Cubans. But it was interesting how they had all those years hidden that ancestry and only inside of the family because they were afraid of being mistaken for something else. So you're right, John. It is the number of narratives. And you have, in some ways, to decide, are you going to fit the narrative that is being given to you? Or are you going to persist in your own narrative? Right now, I'm working on my dissertation, and I'm in the early stages of looking at identity, personal identity, and how it relates to Marcia's status of identity development. And what woke me up on this was one of my clients who once said to me, my teacher keeps telling me that all I'm good for is cleaning her toilets, mowing her grass. And if that's what I'm going to do, he said, I like gangs because gangs let me rise to the top based on my value and my merits. So it's interesting how when we look at self-advocacy, that young man was trying to self-advocate for himself in his environment by taking a positive step and doing something, but nevertheless with negative consequences of which he did not quite fully understand for his future. So yes, we have to learn to value and to respect each other's narratives because we don't realize the harm that we do to society and to individuals when we insist on having only one narrative.
And it starts from when we're young. Those narratives start from very young age. Mm-hmm. I remember, I'll give you a personal story for me. I was a 4.0 student in high school, and I was like, hey, I'm going to go to college. I lived in LA, so I was going to apply for Cal State LA. And so I went to see my counselor. And the first thing that he said at that time, and this was, over 30 years ago, he's like, so tell me, what technical school would you like to go to? So he did not even think of the possibility of me going to a university or limited. So it took me, and I at that time I didn't know the word of self-advocacy, but it took me to say, no, I want to go to the university. I'm capable. But if I followed that road, then I'll be somewhere totally different.
Yep, and I had the same experience in the LA Basin area in the 1960s. When 8th grade, when one of my teachers said, "You're a bright boy. You're going to be a good policeman or a good plumber." And I said, "No, I want to go to college." And she says, "Oh, you Latinos don't have the brain." And she said this, "You guys don't have the brain capacity to go to college unless they put you in one of those non-admission special programs, and then you won't graduate with a real degree." So it was interesting that the issue of advocacy takes a whole range from the social to the personal to the academic that has to be there. You have to develop resiliency, as you cannot do without resiliency. And that's, I think, is a good point of that advocacy. Maria, I'm sorry.
So, and again, we are on the portion of self-advocacy, and this is what the participants as well said in the study. They said that most of the time they felt they were on the outside of the program's social and academic circles. So they have to double up on means to find information pertinent to the program or social activities. And one of the participants said, it has become a moral dilemma. The inability or desire not to share information is a form of abuse because it withholds benefits from others. As a student, I see the need to share the knowledge because it provides me with feedback, and it is information that changes other people. And the other student said, I see this as a ministerial calling. The reason I'm here and I'm persisting is because in one way or another, I'm going to impact others. And in part happens in so many ways. It can be while I'm here during an intensive. How can I be a blessing to another? How can I pray for my colleagues and my professors? And in the back of my mind, I know that I'm going back differently and energized.
Thank you, Maria. Comments? Questions as we move to implications? Okay. What we found out from this study was that Latinos, Latinas walk their own path to persistence. That in many ways, the traditional answers that have been given in previous studies, not all of them are necessarily applicable. Yes, we do need to have a level of academic success and participation, as well as being part of the social fabric of the university and the program. But that unlike other groups, Latinos are not looking to peers or institutions to validate or to affirm who they are. The significant themes was the internal locus of control, the focus on the family, and the focus on faith. Ironically, when Chalupa and the study had described national origin, what we found was that it was not a significant theme in this study, that individuals did have regardless of national origin, what was important were the three areas that we have talked about. If they had a good, strong internal locus, a good focus on the family, and a good focus on faith, and the desire to self-advocate as a result of that, or resiliency, then their opportunities and chances for persistence would increase dramatically. As we close, we're coming to the end. If there's any questions or comments, please. If not, we like to leave you. There are numerous references that we have when we did the study that were put together. So the research for this study covered quite a bit, and subject to your questions or comments, we have finished.
The only question I had was when you discussed that social integration is not a significant theme for Latinos, I wonder why that is, because I'm sure in the outside world they have friendships, they have people that they can relate to and so forth. Why is that not a situation within the school programs?
Well, we're looking at a distinct population. We're looking at individuals who have a focus in an area which they have fought all the way to get there. I have two daughters in the STEM professions. Both of them are engineers. Both of them went to, one went to Northwestern, the other one went to WashU. They both have worked for top industries in the Silicon Valley. And what's been interesting is that they have had to fight their way up. They have not had a need. They could not rely. One of them was even denied admission at her university into the Latino club because they told her that if she didn't speak Spanish, she was not a real Latino. So it was very interesting for her, but it's the thing is that yes, we have friends, yes, we have social world, but when it comes to us, we're going to move forward. and do what we can. I'm sorry, Tashinika, I see that you're unmuted. How can we help? Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Do you have a question?
You know, I think well, I'm Latino. I come from Colombia. I was born in Colombia, and I was adopted when I was 5 years old. And it's, you know, coming to America, it's that struggle of authenticity, I guess, because there is this I guess hierarchy to a certain degree, and also this kind of like litmus test of what is meant to be authentically Latino or what is meant to be authentically from your country. And I think many of us who are kind of in that middle road kind of get caught in this conversation of, I think, of you get it from both sides, I think.
You do.
And it's rough. It's really rough sometimes because, and I wonder, I'm also curious, what do you think about, like, you know, the language of Latino and Latina and Latinx as well in this part, in this narrative of identity?
Well, I think it's intersectional, because the fact is that we are all being affected. And Latinx attempts to bring together a wider, broader group of Latinos, Latinas. So there is absolutely a need for us to be able to understand better how that is being impacted. I have a relative who decades ago migrated to another country. He lives in Europe now. Because of his gender identity, could not find employment here in the United States in his chosen career field. He's found great success, and beyond his wildest dreams, when he moved to Europe. But that is an issue that we have to look at, yes. Any other questions or comments, please?
I was wondering if you have an email or any way to just contact both of you.
Yes, let me see in a few moments. I'm trying to see. Let me go ahead and stop the share at this point to get access to the text messaging, the chat, and because I had not been able to accept it, see it at all while I was here. My my personal account is, and it's available to anyone who wants to write. Please, if you like to, you can send the emails there, and I'll share them with Maria, or unless Maria chooses to do otherwise. But
I'll put mine on there as well, so anybody.
Okay, thank you, Maria.
Thank you.
But any other questions, please?
I would like to thank both of you for presenting your material to us. It's very informative.
Thank you. Okay. And John, did you get a chance to copy and paste?
For some reason, all my pens have stopped working.
Can you highlight the text?
Oh, that's right. Yes.
And copy it to your page, and then we can sign out so you don't lose what's there. Yeah. Let me know when you're done so that we can then go ahead and sign out.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Nils.
You're welcome. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you, Ms. Hudson, for being here with us.
Thank you.
Okay. You ready, John?
1 second. For some reason, my computer's really acting. Here we go.
Ah.
Ah, there we go.